Hey guys, thought I'd give you my impressions of the Avanti Montari E Sport. One of the things that drew me towards this model was the plus tyres. I ride a lot of trails, rail trails and gravel surfaces, including my driveway and the road that I live on, which can get pretty corrugated and chopped up. So I figured larger tyres would provide a lot more security in those conditions. The tyres on this are 2.6 inch Chow Yang, if I've pronounced that right, which I've never heard of, and I presume that they are a modestly priced Chinese tyre. The grip seems to be pretty good in the gravel and seems to roll okay on the tarmac. About the right mix for what I do. The geometry of the frame provides for a pretty relaxed seating position. I actually had an adjustable riser fitted in the shop to pop the handlebars up a couple of inches so I wouldn't have too much weight on my wrists. The bike feels pretty nimble at slow speeds, but feels nice and stable when doing 40 to 50 kilometres an hour going downhill. This is the bike seat that came with the bike. Yeah, nah. My bony ass needs a bit more padding, I'm afraid. I replaced that pretty much immediately as well. Brakes, they're Shimano hydraulic with 160mm rotors, front and rear. They pull the bike up really nicely with no hint of squealing or locking a wheel. I only need a couple of fingers on the levers, even when pulling up from 40 to 50 kilometres an hour going downhill. I always feel I've got stopping power in reserve. While I'd stop short of calling them awesome brakes, they certainly give me more confidence than any of my other brakes and are noticeably better than my cable disc brakes on my other e-bike. Also note that the grips are not stock. The original grips are just sort of plain round and fairly thin, so I opted for something with a bit more support. 9-speed gears, Shimano Acers with a 44 tooth up front and an 11 to 34 cluster at the rear. I can comfortably pedal to around about 40-45 kilometres an hour in top gear before I feel that I'm running out of gears. And let's face it, this really isn't the type of bike that, well, at least I'm going to be pedaling at those speeds very often. Shifting is reasonably smooth, but there's the occasional dud shift and the occasional gear shift when the bike feels like it. I feel probably a bit of cable adjustment will sort that out once things have stretched a bit. The rear rack was also added at the time of purchase and doesn't come standard with the bike. Front forks can be locked out, and I think there's some preload adjustment on the other side. Can't say I notice the forks much. They seem to give a pretty smooth ride with the 2.6 inch tyres. Now the motor on this is the Shimano Steps E6000
with 50 Newton meters of torque.
Sorry about that. It's a torque sensor setup, so the harder you pedal, the more power you get, and it thrives on revs, so to speak. This isn't about low down torque and sort of slow pedalling. It's more about downshifting a few gears and applying a bit more force to your pedalling and getting plenty of zip for your effort. It's a really easy and very natural way to get assistance. You can leave it in normal mode and ease off the pedals if you don't need much power. It's not like my hub drive, which you can just roll the pedals over and chug along at 25 kilometres an hour. The mid-drive on this does require you to put in some effort into your pedalling. The effect is that you feel like you've just about got bionic legs. First or second gear and normal to high modes gets me up hills that I really struggle on my regular bike, and even the hub drive struggles with. Display, very easy to read with all the usual info available. The range estimates seem fairly accurate and they change to reflect your last few kilometres of riding. The battery is a 418 watt-hour battery on this, and if you're not in a hurry on a flattish road, you'd get 100 to 120 kilometres in eco. My gravel rail trails with a few climbs thrown in sees my typical range around about 70 to 80 kilometres. And of course, the more you push it up hills, the less you'll get out of it. You can turn the system on from either the battery or the display, and the motor noise is pretty quiet. Probably on a par with the noise the tyres make on the gravel. Makes a bit more noise when you give it some, but overall is not intrusive. The front chainring has a nice guard either side of the chain, so I can't see that jumping off. And there's just enough room to pop a bit-on cage in there too. Takes off from the start at a reasonable clip too. I've got this on high, third gear. What I really like about the setup is, like I'm in high at the moment, if I just tick the pedals over, that's hardly giving me sort of any power. But as soon as I start pedaling in earnest, yes, I really like the way the Shimano Steps motor works. The fact that I can just tick the pedals over, and if I'm doing sort of 20k down the road, the motor's not doing much at all, regardless of what setting I have the motor on, whether it's eco, normal or high. If I'm just sort of keeping up with the speed I want, and it's good economy too. I'll get probably on a flattish road, you would get sort of 120 or thereabouts if you're not pushing it. But when you want the power, drop down a couple of gears, because this does like to operate at a higher rev. Sort of, it's a bit more like a two-stroke than sort of like a low-down V8 sort of thing. And as soon as you do drop it down a couple of gears and apply some pressure to the pedals, wham, away it goes. It is very responsive. It takes off from a standing start quite quickly. Eats hills in low gears, certainly way better than the hub drive. And I just think it's a really natural way of riding a bike compared to a hub drive, which is basically like someone's pushing you from behind pretty much all the time. This isn't like that. It's like you've got extra strength in your legs you didn't know you had, and as soon as you start pedaling, wham, hey, I didn't know I was that strong, sort of thing. Overall, the more I ride this, the more I like it. It's a good, stable, all surface sort of bike for me. It's a pity I can't tell you what it's like to jump and do loops and take it on single track, but honestly, if I was in something like the Mega Avalanche, I'd be dead within inside about 90 seconds. Be run over, heap on the ground. No bike foo, you see. I should also add that with the motor assistance completely off, it's not too bad to pedal. Sure, it's still pretty heavy. It's what, 22, 23 kilos or something with the battery on. The battery's pretty chunky, but most of the weight seems to be biased more towards the front than the back. At least that's what I feel when I'm lifting it up. But yeah, unlike my SB200 with a hub drive, when the motor cuts out on that, it's a pig. I mean, it feels like it weighs like 40 kilos. This isn't too bad. It just feels like sort of, heavy mountain bike when the motor's not on. So, yeah, all good. I like it. Dismount and ride away.